So I am going to pass over to Dan, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Adrian. It's really a pleasure to be able to do this presentation. I've been wanting to be able to contribute something to Adrian's work, either through interviews or through this kind of presentation. So it was nice to hear that you get ideas from me, but also I get interesting ideas from Adrian as well, and I really look forward to this kind of collaboration. And so this presentation here is is one aspect of my research, and it's about the course development by partner institutions of the OERu, and I'm going to focus in on just one of those partner institutions in this presentation. And I'll be using Davis's Arena of Change with Technology in Education as one of my theoretical frameworks in this research, but I'll also be presenting another one that I've recently integrated into my research. Okay, so the context for this research is that demand for higher education is increasing, and according to Marginson and UNESCO, this demand is increasing by 1% annually. There's also a more vocal desire for equality globally, as well as an increasing need for digital skills. And as people who are involved in open educational practices and OER, we're aware that OER can help to fill that demand. And OEP implementation can support effective OER use. Now, before going any further, I'd like to clarify what I mean by OEP. And so some people specify OEP as being limited, not limited to, but OEP being the practices used strictly for teaching and learning. My definition is broader than that. I'm referring to practices that support production, use, and reuse of OER, which promote innovative pedagogical models and respect and empower learners as co-producers on their lifelong learning path. So I'd like to emphasize the second part of this definition where it is that OEP address the whole OER governance community, policymakers, managers, administrators, any type of educational professional, as well as the learners. So I'm really looking at OEP in the broadest sense in terms of practices that support OER engagement. Now, to define my research a little bit, the problem that I'm addressing is that OERs are not widely used, and there remain questions as to how to increase their adoption. And I bounce a little bit between the term adoption and engagement, and in one of Adrian's publications in 2017, Adrian was publishing based on his PhD research, and he talked about the difference between the term adoption and engagement. And adoption is more, oh, we accept the use of OER, and engagement was more about really getting your hands into OER. And so I bounce between the two, but I take on the meaning of OER engagement. So the purpose of my research is ultimately I would like to provide models for tertiary institutions interested in implementing OEPs, designing courses using OERs, and using open pedagogies, however they may define open pedagogies, which if you are involved in discussions on Twitter, you'll see that a lot of people have different definitions for these open pedagogies. In my research, I've been able to embrace this variety of definitions of that term. I don't at all seek any single definition of that term. I have a couple of guiding questions in my research, and this presentation here is in line with this question. How are higher education institutions implementing OEPs, particularly for instructional design and development for open education? And so this is a case study of processes and OEPs related to designing a course. And then, as we'll see in a few moments, this is all in the context of a human ecosystem. Now, to present the methodology, I first have to give a little bit of context in that my research, broadly speaking, is about the OERu. which is a network of international higher education institutions with a vision to provide affordable access to higher education. And this is for prospective learners located globally. Now, the case study involves a course that the OERu has designed, developed, and delivered. It also involves the organizational culture and structure of the OERu, as well as many case studies of 2 partner institutions. Now, this particular presentation is going to focus in on one of the many case studies of one partner institution. This mini case study really is a small case study. The 2 case studies together, including an analysis of their organizational culture, comprise 1 chapter in my thesis. And so what I'm presenting to you is only the aspect about course development. I'm not going to look at the part about organizational culture. And one important aspect is that all the outputs of my research, be they a poster, any kind of slides that I put online, are all licensed as free cultural works. Now, first I'd like to get into Davis's arena, and I need to point out that Davis here is one of my supervisors. So what is the arena? It's the arena of change with technology and education. It aims to increase the understanding of the impact of an educational innovation in a system. It aims to clarify the complexity of a system. It exposes relationships within the system, and it assists in identifying ways to minimize disruption. Now, this is very important. We want to minimize the disruption with technology into a learning environment. And by minimizing the disruption, we increase the sustainability. This considers that the arena considers that educational technologies and learning environments cause each other to evolve. This is coevolution. And so the technology and the environments have an impact on each other. And as I've discovered with my research, the evolution can be planned, but just as in real life with evolution, there can be surprises. So you can plan to a certain extent, but you have to expect that some things will occur that you didn't plan for. Now, I see that I believe that there are some texts popping up in the chat box. I haven't looked inside to see what's there. If there's anything important that pops up, and if anything is unclear, Adrian, could you please let me know, or please feel free to turn on your microphone and ask me a question.
Okay, no problems at all. At the moment, most of the comments have been affirmations or just observations on what you're actually saying.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks. Now we've explored what the arena is. Now we're going to look a little bit at why we should use it. Well, it's holistic. It's layered from the local site of innovation, which can be the classroom or an online course, to the global level. It's categorized into 5 sectors, which will be mapped out onto the diagrams I'll show you in a moment. And it considers interactions between the roles of the people involved and the matter of the people involved. And I'll get into those terms in just a moment. It also accounts for the impact of culture. That culture is not explored in this presentation. I mentioned earlier that I'm not looking at organizational culture in this presentation, but there's also the culture that's within the classroom that impacts the education. Now, this culture is important because it used to be that the teacher, as the keystone species, as the person who is delivering the education, that teacher's culture would be the one to dominate the classroom. But as appreciation for culture has increased, we're seeing that we need to take into consideration the culture of the students, however various those cultures may be, and incorporate that into our course design. But again, that aspect is not going to be elaborated on in this presentation. Now, the diagrams that are represented using this human ecology have these circles, which are actually a Venn diagram. So at the very center, we've got the course ecosystem, and we've got that nested inside the organizational ecosystem, the national ecozone, and then at the highest level, the global ecosphere. And within these systems, within these ecosystems, we have non-living matter, and this can take the form of hardware, software, lesson plans, educational policies, anything that's non-living. We also have living matter, also referred to as species. And these species are referred to by their roles. It's never an individual person, it's never Katie or Dr. Bob. We are referring to roles. So we will refer to the director of an organization, we'll refer to a course developer or an instructional designer or the learners, but we never refer to individual people. Now, an important species is the keystone species that I mentioned just a moment ago. The keystone species with any given ecosystem is a person who is a role that has a lot of impact on that ecosystem. They have a lot of influence, and they can help to diminish the disruption when we've got an educational innovation. So their role is very important. Now, I'm also going to go over Cox and Trotter's OER adoption pyramid. Now, this pyramid was developed through a series of studies that Cox and Trotter did. They began with an examination of South African universities, and what they wanted to see was what was the relationship between organizational culture and OER engagement. And they soon realized that culture didn't have the impact that they thought. Rather, there were challenges or factors or barriers that came into play before culture could have any impact. So to look at the slide here, the purpose of their study was to go beyond simply listing the various challenges or barriers to OER adoption. Rather, they wanted to integrate these factors, these barriers, these challenges, into an analytical framework that makes sense of them and allows for cross-institutional comparison. So what they saw was, with their research there was all these barriers that came into play, and a lot of research on OER adoption, OER engagement, talks about the various barriers encountered within an institution, and the study often ends there. But what Cox and Trotter wanted to do was organize these barriers into an analytical framework. Now, what informed this framework was that they discovered that different factors or barriers or challenges differed in terms of how much lecturers had control over them. So, for example, the infrastructure within an institution, lecturers have very little control over that. But lecturers have more control over their ability to take on professional development to use OER. So that was the first criterion that they discovered, was that there were different amounts of control over these challenges. The factors that they've included in their pyramid are those that are essential for OER engagement. So we're not looking at variables, which was another term that they used in their research. The variables simply affect how OER are used. What they prefer to look at with this framework is the factors that impede or encourage OER engagement. They also discovered that there were two agents involved that had tension between them, the lecturers and the institution. So again, I mentioned earlier, the lecturers have a varying amount of control over the factors, while the other agent at play is the institution. So where the institution cedes control, the lecturer gains it. Now, something to consider in this framework is that anyone can borrow OER, we know that. And within this adoption framework, this OER adoption framework, a key point is that, well, one must have intellectual property rights to create OER. The lecturer can only create the OER if they're granted the institution's permission. Otherwise, it's the institution that has the intellectual property rights. So this is all these points are elaborated in Cox and Trotter's research, and there were 3 articles that I referred to. They're listed in the references of this presentation, and I'll be talking to Adrian afterwards to see how I can share this presentation. So this is the OER adoption pyramid. So I'll explain it before I get into it in more detail with respect to my research. Now you have this arrow on the left, which is a continuum. It goes from externally determined at the bottom to internally determined at the top. This refers to the control that either the institution or the lecturer has over their engagement with OER. Externally determined means it's institutionally determined, it's institutionally controlled. But as we go up the pyramid, we're referring to factors or challenges or barriers where the individual, the lecturer, has more control. So at the bottom, we've got access to infrastructure. It's the institution that decides whether enough computers are provided, whether the internet connection is, they decide about the broadband and such things, and maintenance of electricity. And this level was very important in South Africa because infrastructure cannot be taken for granted. Then you go up to the next level. Okay, you have your infrastructure, great. That means you now have access to the next level, which is legal permission to use or create OER as determined by institutional policy. And in some cases, it's the national policy that predominates. So you might have a national copyright law, which says, no, it's the employer that has the right to the intellectual property rights, and there may be provisions for educational use. Going up to the next level is awareness of OER, awareness of what they are and how they differ from other educational resources. Okay, we've climbed the pyramid. We've got access, we've got permission, we've got awareness of OER. Oh, do we have capacity to find, use, or create or upload OER? So now we're referring to the skills about OER. And I'm sure that this is something that you've come across in research on OER, is often people list barriers to OER as being, well, we know that OER exists, but nobody's got the skills to use them, or it's taking too long to learn these skills. The next level in the pyramid is availability. Availability of OER of requisite quality. Now in the research, they also refer to the usability and usability of the OER. But this point refers to, well, what kind of OER are available. If you're at a first year university, if you're in a first year university course such as psychology, which is a course that is in great demand, the chances are high that you're going to find an OER on that topic. You'll probably find more than you need, and then the issue becomes having to sift through the OER and finding a course that suits your institution. At the other end of the spectrum is highly specialized OER. So you may have a topic that is for a fourth year university course or for a postgraduate course. Those topics are less likely to be available as OER. Now we climb the pyramid, we get to the top, and now control is completely in the hands of the lecturer. Do you have the volition to adopt or engage with OER? How are you going to do it? That's completely up to you, but this is now your decision. Will you do it? Now the previous pyramid was my adaptation of the one in the research. This image is directly taken from the Cox and Trotter publication. And when we're at the volition to adopt OER, there are interactions among the personal individual values. So your personal choice to use OER is informed by your values. But it's also informed by the departmental and disciplinary norms, and it's informed by the support mechanisms and strategic commitments of the institution. And this is where the organizational culture has an influence. At no other place in the pyramid does organizational culture have an influence. So we've talked about barriers, challenges, enablers. but I'm going to now block those terms. Instead, in my research, I'm going to refer to stressors. This is a term that I'm borrowing from the ARENA, from Davis's ARENA framework. In the ecological framework, we refer to stressors, and they can be positive or negative. So they refer to both barriers and enablers. And they don't have to be opposing things. You don't have to have a barrier that is strictly a barrier. You don't have to have an enabler that is strictly an enabler. And I'm going to pull from my research to elaborate on this point. I had an interviewee who saw how a barrier and an enabler can be the same thing. He said, weirdly enough, I think a barrier and an enabler might be one and the same thing. I don't think sometimes people realize how easy it can be to get started on open education projects. You could go to Reclaim Hosting and start up a WordPress multi-site for $10 a month and run a pretty sophisticated open online technology framework. And there's so much OER out there, you could ramp things up really quickly. I think sometimes that enabler, the relative low cost to entry, can also in a weird way create a barrier because it, I think for a lot of people, undermines credibility. So we've got the low cost in opposition with a possibility of undermining credibility. These are two sides of the same coin. So whenever you come across barriers and enablers to OER engagement in the research, please examine them and think about how, if it's identified as a barrier, how can it also possibly be an enabler? Now, I'll quickly go through my findings. So here we have the ARENA. This is how the ARENA would be laid out. At the very middle, we've got the course ecosystem. And then we branch out to the higher levels. And we've got the 5 sectors located around it. So if I place an icon in a particular location in the ARENA, it means it has significance in terms of which circle it's in. So in this case, I'm in the regional or national ecozone. And I'm in the political sector. If I place an item between 2 sectors, that means that that item or that matter refers to both of those sectors. Now, in the main case study that I examined, we had a course developer, CD, and exec. These people within the course ecosystem were both developing a course together. Now, the exec is identified as such because at the level of the organization, this is a keystone species. He was involved in the course, but also held a high position within the organization. And so he was able to bring in his knowledge into the course and his power of delegation of roles so that this course could get developed more smoothly. We've got OL, which refers to open licenses. This course was openly licensed because it was made for the OERu, and it was developed using openly licensed software. The exec and the course developer are both bridges to the OERu because they were heavily involved in OER activities for many years. So they bring in their knowledge from the OERu into this course development. They didn't have to be trained on what the OERu is all about. That was already achieved. Within the course, there was the possibility for social media, for social networking, but the course was made for independent study. So the student could seek out interaction if they chose to do so. And they were guided to do so through teaching support, which was provided inside the course. Now, OERu courses don't involve tutorial support. There isn't a teacher usually available to help the students along. So instead, in this course, that support was provided within the course through links to websites and through text. The course was made using OER from Sailor.org. The material was changed so that it would reflect a global culture, because originally the material reflected more of an American culture. The course was developed in Wiki Educator and later published in WordPress. The coding in Wiki Educator was done with the help of a volunteer. This course was developed on the personal time of the course developer and the executive, but the executive was able to use his keystone species role for subsequent development and get the work integrated into the normal 9-to-5 day. There were also partner institutions of the OERu that provided some feedback to the course developers with regards to the course quality, and the course developers strongly appreciated that feedback. I'm just going to skip a few icons and get to the next level. So here in this arena, what I'm presenting here are stressors. So there were stressors that came up in the research, and with the help of Cox and Trotter's framework, I was able to organize them according to their OER adoption pyramid. So this dark green color refers to the bottom layer of that OER adoption pyramid. So here we are with infrastructure access as the stressor. Now, with this case study, with this institution, infrastructure didn't come up as a problem. It was never mentioned. But I didn't have any students from this institution as interviewees. So I can't assume that there were no infrastructure problems for the students. So there could be infrastructure problems at the level of the course. For example, the student can't access a video because they don't have the bandwidth for it. And maybe if there's an international student coming in from the global ecosphere, maybe their infrastructure doesn't allow them to access the full course. So these infrastructure access stressors that I'm presenting here are not identified as such. They didn't come up in my research. I'm just saying that I can't neglect them. The possibility that they are there has to be acknowledged. We're going to climb up one level of the pyramid. Legal permission. In this case, legal permission was granted for this OER course to be developed, but normally at this institution and in the country of this institution, the legal permission lies with the institution, not with the course developer. Now, this may seem like a strong barrier, but the permissions can be negotiated. Yeah, I'll leave that at that for now. Okay, conceptual awareness. Now, conceptual awareness can occur also at various levels. And I've placed that at the professional level here because it can be up to the course developer to seek professional development to learn more about OER. So they can learn about how OER can be used within a course. They can learn about how OER can be used within their organization, or they can skip to the global level and learn about how OER are used in other places, or how different cultures perceive OER. So this conceptual awareness reaches throughout the entire global ecosphere down to the course ecosystem. Okay, there's a variety of ways in which there's technical capacity in the system. I'm not going to go over each of the possible stressors, but some of the technical capacity lies, for example, over here in the course ecosystem. It's about, again, professional development and developing the skills needed for engaging with OER. And one of the things that happened with this mini case study is that the course developer and exec ended up leaving the institution. And so there was an empty niche. In the terms of ecology, there was an empty niche left behind, and that becomes a very important stressor. Luckily, over several years, the exec and the course developer had been able to work with a variety of people to ensure that the skills were passed on. And so though they left and that stressor had the potential to cause major disruption in the system, they had already taken care of that issue. Now, I see that I have a minute and a half left, so I'm only going to quickly go through the top two layers of the OER adoption pyramid. One point is the availability of OER. In this course, luckily, the OER they needed were there. In fact, it was the fact that this course was available as a fully designed course that they were able to develop it into what they wanted it to be. They didn't want to start from scratch. They wanted to start from a highly developed course. And the last layer of the pyramid is personal volition. So what drove these two course developers were students within their region who were pushing for OER, and it was their own personal and professional drive that got them involved in this project. So this diagram is just when you have all the stressors together, it can look a bit intimidating, but at least now we've gone layer by layer and you've seen that there is a system to these stressors, and this diagram can help as a sort of a needs assessment so that you identify all the stressors, and then you go back to the other diagram that I presented earlier, and then you can see how the different matter within your system can address these different stressors. So that is where my presentation concludes, and I'm just going to shut off my timer here. Okay, and I've got my references listed here at the end of the presentation. So now I welcome your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. What I can see just from what you've presented today is that we could have dug into this so much more. We could have given you an hour and a half, and I'm sure that we still wouldn't have gone into all of the nooks and crannies that I'm sure that you have explored. Now, we have had a number of very positive comments coming through in the text. So people are really liking the work that you've done in terms of visualizing this type of phenomenon and being able to do that needs assessment, and also just the way in which you were able to very clearly unpack the work of Cox and Trotter. So a lot of good affirmations there. Now, what I would like to do is open the floor. So if you've got a question for Dan or even a comment, please unmute and jump in. Just introduce yourself as you do so.
Dan, it's Karina here.
Hi.
Thank you again for the presentation. It was really, really great. It was clear, and like my comments I put on the chat box, it's really interesting to see how you unpacked all that work and have then turned into your own and useful to your study. And the use of visuals, I found it really helpful as you went step by step, you know, all the things you've done and show to us where it fits within the framework. So it was really helpful to understand everything you were saying. So the clarity and the visuals were wonderful. So I know you are close to submit, but can we access any publications or reports or case study or anything you have published, or if you have had the opportunity, because it is a big job to do a PhD, but just wonder if we would have access before your thesis even is available to all.
Well, thanks, Karina, for all the compliments, but and thank you for your interest in the research. As for publications, one sort of publication that I've got, it's another presentation that is very similar to this one, but it includes a lot of text. So what I just presented, you know, people could listen to the recording later, but the text is actually in the presentation, and this was what I presented at OER 19 in Galway. So some of my analysis is there. I waited a long time before I felt I was ready to publish, and I'm glad I did, because I came onto the studies by Cox and Trotter quite late, and they've changed the way I'm analyzing my results. So hopefully within the next year I'll have my work published, but as it is so far, I have mainly publications through conferences, so either only abstract or short articles. There'll be one short article coming out for PCF9, which will be in Scotland in September. That will be referring to the tools used by the OERu in its courses, the open source tools that enable student-student interaction. But as for my publications, they'll be coming. I do intend to publish 3 or 4 articles, and hopefully, again, they'll come out in the next year.
Because some of our colleagues here have commented how this could be useful for implementation, and you know, and it's a way to get to help institutions, of course. That's the aim of your study, but also to get your work visible. So yeah, would be nice to have access to those publications eventually when they are out. And I agree with Wayne here about, you know, your robust and extensive analysis of an OER mini case studies. How many mini case studies did you use?
I did 2. I wish I could have done more, and I wish I could have had a greater diversity of case studies. But at least with the case studies I've got, the information was fairly consistent, so they kind of validate each other a little bit, even though the information is not necessarily generalizable one to the other. But yeah, I've got too many case studies. And I also have the greater case study of the OERu, and I have used the Cox and Trotter framework to analyze that larger study as well.
Right, very interesting. Yeah, no, excellent.
And one thing I could, sorry to interrupt, one thing I could offer is I could have talks with people one-on-one or with small groups. If anyone's interested in discussing how they might implement something at their institution, I could have you know, small talks, and yeah, because it will be a while before the publications come out.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I've just in case people aren't taking a look at the chat as well, I have put in there that if you do have any questions and you don't actually want to voice them out loud, please do put them in the chat, and we'll be more than happy to answer them that way. But I just welcome anybody who wanted to jump in. Just unmute your mic and go from there.
I had a quick question. Adrian and I were bouncing around the idea of the keystone species a little bit earlier, and I know that was right at the beginning of your presentation. I suppose really what I'm asking is, is there a tool or something to really identify those particular keystone species? Adrian and I were debating who the keystone ones were in the Australian context, and I'm wondering if if you've got a suggestion of a good way to do that.
This framework of Davis's doesn't really come along with a checklist. That's one of the reasons I was interested in developing the separate needs assessment arenas, so as to have a form of checklist for some items. For the keystone species, it kind of, for now, would be up to those involved to use what knowledge you have and try to identify that person. And the keystone species can affect different things in different ways. So, you know, you can have the keystone species of the organization who is the director of the organization, but other people play important leadership roles as well. So it depends how you define the keystone species, and it's about examining each ecosystem to see who really has the most influential role. So in a case where if there's a federal policy that affects your institution, well, then the prime minister or president is the keystone species, and they're affecting your course innovation. So for now, until any checklists are developed, or maybe you can develop your own for your situation, it's really a matter of examining each ecosystem and determining who the keystone species are, and how is it that they're keystone species. What are the criteria?
Yeah, that you've nailed what I was asking. I don't know how much you know about the Australian context, but the title Vice Chancellor in various forms in Australia seems to be getting handed out a lot more fluidly these days. Associate Vice Chancellor, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Pro Vice Chancellor. And so I was kind of saying, how do we boil that down? And so that was useful on its own, but I acknowledge the point as well that it would be great for us in Australia, I think particularly, be able to say who's the person that actually makes these decisions, who's the keystone. There's so many of them. They're very admin heavy at the moment.
Okay. Well, one of the things about the arena, this framework, is that nothing is in isolation. And so if you've got several keystone species, then identify them all and see how they impact each other. And maybe there is one that's more influential than the rest, but the others may be so influential that you do need to identify them and see how they affect all the other aspects of the ecosystem.
Okay, so we've got time for probably one more question, if anybody would like to pose that, and then we will start to wrap up for the day. So last calls for questions. Okay, I'm going to take that to mean that everyone is still digesting a lot of the information here. And I think as well, Dan, that one of the things that really spoke to me out of this was that institutional mapping and working out where the stressors are is certainly something I think that could be quite valuable, and maybe there is a bright future for you in running consultation workshops with various institutions. I definitely think that there would be institutions out there who would clamour for the opportunity to work with you on this.
Well, thank you very much, Adrian. And thank you to everyone for this opportunity to do this presentation. I have a lot of affection for Australia. When I was living in New Zealand, I often visited Australia, and I loved it every time. And I loved the different collaborations I've had with Australians in different forms. So thank you very much for this opportunity. It really meant a lot to me.
Our pleasure, and I am mindful that it is very late and early and very early in Canada at the moment. So thank you so much for giving us your time. You've also managed to give me some wording for my goals over the next year and my performance review. I'm going to write in there that I want to move towards becoming a keystone species instead of a keystone crop.
Awesome.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Now, everybody, that brings us to the end of this month's meeting for the OEP SIG. During the month, there are plenty of ways to keep in contact. We have got the OEP Digest, and also I'll be sending out some calls for ideas around our Ascolite presence, and also around getting up that register of the kind of who's who of open for Australia, and what networks and the like that people are involved in. Also during the month, there will be some other communications, especially around our September webinar. So I really hope that you take the opportunity to use some of our shared resources, to leave some comments and to engage with those, so that way we really are embracing what I believe the Creative Commons slogan is, which is when we share, everyone wins. So if we can certainly adopt that as an ethos here, then I think the community will certainly benefit. So thank you once again, Dan. I really appreciate your time, and also for stimulating some good discussion, and we will work out a way to share your resources after this. Excellent. So thank you very much, everybody. And I look forward to seeing you during the month and also at our August SIG. Thanks very much for coming, everyone.